Welcome to the FCS Selection Show. It's been a grueling 12 to 13 weeks, depending on what team you are, to get to this point, and we have some excellent teams to show you. The selection committee has spent a long time selecting them. Before we begin, though, I'd like to introduce our crew today. We have Chase, you and I, who is the chairman or co-chairman of the selection committee, and we have Tenny, who is a community member who has offered up his talents as a voice to be here today, and we like to thank him for that. I kid, but anyways, before we begin, we'd like to voice out the names of victims of police brutality in all seriousness, and we would like to speak out against these and this actions. We'd like to say the names of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the countless victims of police brutality throughout all of American history and, to be honest, world history. The FCS doesn't stand with any of the police that have decided to so devastatingly murder black men and women in the streets. I don't know if anybody else wants to say a word to that, but
it really stood out to me how something that was we were just trying to get the selection show, to be hosted by the FCS Late Show, and Hampton dropped something in there, and I was like, oh, that's really touching. I'm glad that he said something. And then within the hour, at least 2 or 3 dozen people had reposted that same thing and held the same sentiment. And I think it really shows that the FCS community and just the Discord community, I guess, in general, FBS and FCS, it does stretch further than a lot of people think. But we all have some of the same viewpoints. We all believe a lot of the same things, but even though we don't talk about them all the time, this is still something that we all hold true and we all do believe in. And I'm really glad that Hampton did say that, and everyone else was able to echo it.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Chase, and we would like to jump into this selection show here. Oops, I'm in the wrong chat. Okay, perfect. There we go. So we have spent a long time, and by we I mean Chase and his buddies have spent a long time selecting these teams, going every single week through every single team, creating from scratch an entire list from 28 to 1 of the best teams in FCS, culminating in this week, which is the ultimate determination of who are the haves and have-nots of this season. Do we have anything else, or should we begin and get it out?
I'm ready to kick this thing off. It has been a really good season. We've seen some pretty intense resumes, and there were some spots on the 1 through 28 that took a lot of discussion and a lot of changing of minds on the committee, and I'm ready to go to it.
Okay, excellent.
For anyone listening along, we will be posting the graphics in the selection show chat.
Not selection show chat,
but the selection show channel, and Chase will be reviewing everything as we go along.
That's right. All right, without further ado, the number 1 team in FCS, without too much surprise, is Bethune-Cookman, 12-1 on the season, arguably the best resume in the FCS history. They had more top wins, more quarter 1 wins, and the best strength of schedule in the entire country, all doing it with 1 loss. And Palo, unsurprisingly, gets the number 1 nod. Number 2 is Incarnate Word. My co-chairman with me gets a 10-3 record, but with one of the best resumes in FCS history as well. I would argue potentially even better than Montana's in our first FCS season. Incarnate Word gets the number 2 spot out of the Southland. Number 3, everybody's favorite meme king, is Brady Beaton. He gets the number 3 spot. Mississippi Valley State is the Delta Intercollegiate champion and the only other team with 12 wins grabbing the number 3 spot. Number 4 is Princeton, the Ivy League champion. That's 3 in a row for Einstein. Just one of 2 coaches to have 3 consecutive conference championships, and he gets the 4th spot and the first of the orange and black gang to join the playoffs. Number 5 is Cal Poly. They did fall a couple of spots after losing their conference championship game, but 11 wins and a very hardy resume was enough to keep them safely with a bye and the number 5 slot, though they did fall below MVSU and Princeton. Number 6 is Delaware, the CAA champion. I believe this is where you ping the Delaware Hens in the selection show chat. They get the number 6 spot after taking down Youngstown State in the Colonial Athletic Association championship game 35-28. And with mentioning that, number 7 is Youngstown State. Losing the Colonial Championship game, they still had one heck of a resume at 10-3. The Penguins were very confidently still a bye team, but they did fall after losing their title game. And the 8th and final bye goes to Kennesaw State. The second ASUN team grabs the final bye here. Kennesaw did not make the conference championship game. It was the only team with a bye to not make a conference title game, but 9-3 and a great resume was still enough to push them over the hill. Anything you guys would like to add before we drop into the rest of the bracket?
I'd just like to commend Bethune-Cookman, like you were saying, on having possibly the best season anybody has ever had. I think that's really incredible, and I think Pillow would, if we had what is it, an MLS, where you have the most points at the end of the season.
Yeah, Supporters Shield.
Yes, the Supporters Shield. I think he should be proud regardless, and even if he gets knocked out first game, this is a monumentous occasion, and he should tout his FCS Supporters Shield proudly.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I mean, 12-1, I said arguably, but I do personally believe it's the greatest regular season of all time. I'm sure we'll drop a lot of resumes in the post-game show talking about why we chose this team over that team, and Bethune-Cookman definitely blew this season out of the water. All right, are we ready to get on to the next matchups here? This is the most exciting part of the tournament. This is
the matchups.
Probably the best
the
part.
First round matchups.
Yeah, when we release these first round matchups and you get to see the top teams and who they're going to take on. Starting on who will face Bethune-Cookman. Number 16 Mercer against number 17 Wofford. These were 2 teams that were extremely close in the committee rankings, one that required a tiebreaker round when we were voting in these last few days. And Mercer, another of NASUN teams to join the fray. Wofford out of the Carolina Football Conference, both getting at-large bids. Mercer only with 7 wins on the season, but with a fantastic resume and a bunch of good wins. And depth was something very important. And they grabbed the 16 spot with the rights to face off against Bethune-Cookman, taking on Wofford. Next up is Merrimack versus the Big Sky champion Montana Grizzlies. Montana makes it 3 seasons in a row, making the playoffs, one of a few teams that have done that. Montana, of course, once coached by Habes, now coached by Wazup, and Merrimack as a 15 seed there. This is the first time they've ever made the playoffs, though they've only been in the FCS for 2 seasons. They've made it in their 2nd season. The next spot with the right to take on Brady and MVSU is McNeese State at number 14 against number 19 Indiana State. The 19 slot did go to Shake. We were deliberating between some of those final at-large bids, and he was one of the final ones to get it. I'm sure we'll talk about that later with some of these questions, but McNeese State grabs the number 14 spot out of the Southland. One of those teams that was extremely dominant in the first season of FCS and then had a down year last year, was able to finally claw into the playoffs for the first time in program history. For the rights to face off against Princeton, you have number 13 Campbell and number 20 Furman. This is perhaps the most intriguing first-round matchup of them all. Number 13 Campbell finally slides his way into the playoffs. The Congressional Camel was very close the last 2 seasons. And of course, as we all know, number 20 Furman is coached by the reigning national champion Uga, who took Stony Brook all the way to the title game last year and emerged victorious. He takes over the Furman Paladins in their first ever playoff berth. With the rights to face off against the Cal Poly Mustangs, it's Holy Cross at the number 21 spot and Texas Southern at the 12 spot. Holy Cross, one of the final at-large bid teams to make it into the tournament. Another one that the committee deliberated on for quite some time, but did ultimately come out with what I believe to be is the correct decision. Texas Southern, as the number 12, is another team out of the Southland, making their second consecutive playoff berth. Of course, last year was marred with some controversy regarding RNG. A new head coach is in town and will look to extend the playoff run. With the rights to face off against the Delaware Hens is number 11 New Hampshire against number 22 Northern Iowa. New Hampshire grabs its first ever playoff berth. The 16th best defense coming out of the America East will face off against Northern Iowa, the only other team alongside Princeton to win 3 consecutive conference championship games. Now, to face off against the Penguins, we have number 10 Pennsylvania, coached by Jocks, and number 23 Long Island. And yes, that's right, 6 and 7 Long Island manages to grab the number 23 seed after winning the America East Conference Championship game. Pennsylvania making its first ever playoff berth after a very close call last season and not making it into the playoffs. They do finally get over the hump. And finally, the final round of playoff teams, number 9 Alabama A&M faces off against number 24 Hampton, another team that has made it to the conference championship game all 3 years. Hampton gets back to the playoffs after missing last year. Alabama A&M won 9 games last season but did not make it into the playoffs. This year they have enough on the resume to get into the field of 24. All right, awesome. Do we think we should drop the entire bracket?
Yeah, sorry, I was just...
All as well.
Man, I'm looking at these...
before we...
Yeah.
All right, yeah, we'll do the full bracket here.
There it is. And like we said in the pregame, Cooper is the one who created these graphics, so if you want to give him a shout-out in the selection show chat, did a great job today whipping these up. So guys, let's toss it to some questions I think you might have, or unless we want to do the first 4 out first, actually.
Yeah, I got first 4 out here.
So here's extremely contentious stuff, as I'm sure will be shown in the selection show chat. But the first team out is the Yale Bulldogs at 7-5, followed very closely by Bryant, one of the most historic programs in FCS history. And then FAMU at number 27 and Eastern Illinois at number 28. These 4 teams will be the top 4 seeds in the NIT, except for EIU, whom their coach retired, and we've decided to replace 28 with the 29th team, which is, coincidentally, the man who's about to speak to you, Danny.
Woohoo! Season culminating in an NIT berth, and it's not an NIT bye, but hopefully I'll get a good, easy chump to play against. NIT will be dropped after we have a little bit of a chat, and it's going to be a good one. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun time, and I think, will run concurrently and right afterwards, and the other tournaments that are going on, they'll have 2 days from now, so 48 hours from this moment at 6:20 p.m. Pacific time to begin their play. They have 48 hours to fill up their spots, as they now, after the NIT is announced, we'll know who is and isn't eligible to play in their tournaments. Very excited by this, and we'll be keeping close tabs on both tournaments.
Yeah, this is one of the best times of the year. You got the playoffs going, and now the NIT, which I think is really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
A new sanctioned event that we have an actual second tier of playoffs instead of just an assortment of uh, stuff that we weren't sure,
You
if
know, it was fun though. I gotta say, all those random tournaments.
no, and there still will be some random tournaments, but
Yeah,
I'm excited to see how the NIT kicks off its inaugural season.
yeah. And our plan is to continue the NIT as a permanent event. I know we've switched from postseason events to postseason event, and I can't say this with any large degree of certainty, but the plan is, yes, to continue the NIT as a sanctioned event each season to keep the other tournaments. But yeah, so I don't know if this was in our plan, but I think after looking at this bracket just haphazardly, I think I'm seeing upset city. I see 4 or 5 of these teams who I think have a really good, like a better than 50% shot at winning, even though they're the worst seed.
Yeah, I'll toss this conversation over to you and Tenny as the committee chairman or co-chairman. I don't want to comment too much on what I think as far as upsets, but I will let you and Tenny go for it.
Tenny, do you see any big mismatches here outside of like maybe the top, 9 versus 24, or 23, or 10 versus 23? Like, is there anything here that you see as a big mismatch? Ooh, Robo Tenny.
Yeah, reset that mic, my man.
Guys, we gotta fix up the Python code in our Tenny bot.
We couldn't get Camelbot on the show, so we had to get Tennybot.
Am I better now?
You're
good.
good.
You're good.
I don't know. My mic just like goes out if I don't talk for a while.
All right.
I was gonna say the Northern Iowa New Hampshire match. Like Northern Iowa is a known contender in the FCS. We all know it's Chase, but he's a team that can win any game. He's proven to be a top seed in the past, so I could see him making a run. Not just past New Hampshire, but Delaware, and who knows where it can go from there.
I think it's a great. I'm not even gonna try and I'm not even doing this to suck up to Chase, but that was my first pick as well. And I think I'm in the same quadrant. I was also looking at Indiana State, who I think personally think that his resume should have been put him a little bit higher. But that McNeese game, I'm taking Indiana State big in that one. I think it was a very good ranking, and I can't really argue with too much. But I'm really looking forward to that game in particular. We have particular questions, actual legitimate questions, that Tenny and I have drafted up. Yeah?
Before we do anything, I just want everyone to know I dropped a challenge in the selection show channel that if you want to do a prediction on how you think the tournament will turn out, then now's your time. We'll probably start the games here in like an hour or so, sometime tonight, but and that selection will be up until, usually we leave it up until the first team scores in any game. So it'll be sometime tonight that will go down.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's a pretty short window, so while we're doing this, you might want to listen in and fill out your challenge.
Okay. So, I'll go off first here. Tenny and I have prepared a couple questions to throw at Chase here, see if he can field them as the co-chairman, see if he knows his stuff. And we, didn't really particularly know what the bracket would look like. Actually, no, I guess we both kind of did. But we try to keep our heads out of that area, so these are kind of coming a little bit off the cuff. Particularly, I wanted to know, Chase, what separated number 1 and number 2 in your mind? And that would be Incarnate Word great start. That'd be Bethune-Cookman and Incarnate Word.
Yeah, like we talked about earlier when we announced Bethune-Cookman and Incarnate Word, I mean, 2 of the best resumes in FCS history, potentially the 2 best. It it was up for debate, but it was unanimous. I mean, Bethune-Cookman took away number 1, and no committee member had any qualms with that. And Bethune-Cookman is tied for the most wins in FCS, has an FCS high in quarter 1 wins with 7, top half wins with 10, 5 wins over playoff teams. And they did all of this with the number 1 strength of schedule. It's very, very impressive. And like you said, they should be very proud of a regular season that was so dominant. And not only dominant in the actual game thread, but just metrically, something we've never seen before. I think Incarnate Word did have a really fantastic resume, though. Definitely deserves number 2, even with the 3 losses, which is something we can also talk about, having 3 losses and being above a 1-loss MVSU. But I do think that they lack the elite wins that Bethune-Cookman has. We'll obviously have some committee members that would be happy to talk about it in the selection show chat, but it's tough to rival the best resume in FCS history when you don't have some of the elite wins that Bethune-Cookman did.
Right. So, the last 2 teams, or not the last 2 teams, but the last team to get a bye was Alabama A&M. What was the wait, hold on. What's that?
Kennesaw State over
Kennesaw.
Yep. No problem.
What was the deciding factor between those 2 teams, Kennesaw and Alabama A&M, as the last team to get a bye?
The funny thing is, so they're both in the same conference, as we all know. Both compete in the ASUN. And it was upsetting and kind of frustrating for the committee because they didn't get to play each other on the season. And if they did, it would have been quite easy to just be able to point to that head-to-head game and say, well, that's a fantastic tiebreaker. Obviously, head-to-head isn't everything, but it would have been a fantastic tilt one way or the other. Well, we didn't get that. So, of course, we looked at common games, which, as playing in the same conference and having a great record, they both had an extremely similar common games record against those teams. They both played Bethune-Cookman and lost. One team played Campbell and lost, while the other team played Youngstown State and lost. But it all came down to, ultimately, throughout the season, these 2 teams were battling and rivaling for a spot above the other one. Kennesaw State came out on top because they have one less loss, and they avoided the 2 bad losses. Jacksonville is the worst loss by Kennesaw State, but Alabama A&M lost to 37 Sam Houston State and 53 North Alabama. So kind of tough to overcome those 2 losses. It's hard to look at a team that made a conference championship game and punish them for doing so by losing. But in all fairness, before the championship game, Alabama A&M was below Kennesaw State. So this was not something that we decided to punish them for making a CCG.
Okay, that's really good reasoning. Yeah, that can't have been easy. I mean, like, that's always kind of one of the toughest decisions. I know as a former number 9 seed, it kind of hurts, but when you're right at the end of, right at the cusp of getting into that spot or not, it's kind of, it was on you to not end up in that seeded range.
Precisely,
or in that, yeah. So my question then would be, which of the 28, or I guess 29 ranked teams was the hardest to rank, or which one was the most polarizing in the committee?
Yeah, there were a handful. I think when we got to probably about the 4th round of voting, we were extremely polarized on McNeese State, and perhaps the most polarizing team was Furman. That's an auto bid, so we knew that Furman was going to be in the field. We just didn't know where. Ultimately, they landed... let me check the rankings here. Ultimately, Furman landed at number 20. We had some that had them slotted below Holy Cross, some that had them all the way above Mercer and between Mercer and Wofford. So they could have been anywhere in that range of outcomes. They did end up smack dab in the middle at number 20. I think it's a pretty fair ranking for the Paladins. They've got a pretty solid resume. Ultimately, they got another good win, taking down Elon in the title game. But you really have to point to Delaware being the main reason why Furman isn't just an auto bid sitting at the bottom. They're an auto bid that got the 20 spot, that they don't have to face off against the 9 seed and sit in the quadrant of number 1. Delaware kind of ran the table toward the end of the season, won the CCG, and that became an even better win for the Paladins. Of course, Wofford and Davidson, 2 other solid wins for Furman on the resume. And it's just a pretty solid resume all around. The number 120 loss to Southeast Missouri weighed them down a bit more, and that's in the eyes of some committee members was why they ranked them a little lower. But I think we landed on a pretty good spot with number 20 for the Paladins.
That's actually really surprising. I
All
figured
right.
they were. Oh well. Interesting. Tenny, you got one?
All right. My last question here. Holy Cross was the last team in that wasn't an auto bid.
Yeah. Yep.
What was the deciding factor for them over the first 4 out teams?
Yeah, it was something that we could see shaping up even during conference championship week, like before we were making our final rankings, when we were ranking the penultimate ones. We knew that there would be about 3 or 4 teams that would be in contention for the at-large bid. In the end, in this final ranking, it was 3 teams. Holy Cross, Yale, and Bryant were the 3. What was good for us is that none of those teams really shifted too much heading into the final ranking. We had the same ranking in last week's as they were in the final one: Holy Cross, Yale, and Bryant in that order. It was just how far was Holy Cross going to fall after losing to Long Island in the conference championship game. And we really didn't want to punish them too much, not because of making the conference championship game, but we also had to balance losing to number 60 Long Island. So I see it as, when compared to Yale, Holy Cross has an extra win, same amount of quad 1 wins, same amount of top half wins, depth of wins, all with that extra victory I said. And it made it to the CCG and avoided the basement loss, which I think was something that Yale really struggled with, having that Cornell loss down the stretch. And when you have that sub 100 loss, even though it is 100 on the dot, it's something that really sticks out on a resume and was the reason we've dropped Yale. Now for Bryant, this would have been a lot closer if we didn't have the absolute fantastic finish in week 12. Holy Cross played Bryant in the final regular season game, and Holy Cross scored in the last minute to win. I believe it's the last 20 seconds of that game to win in the head-to-head, which has immense sway, like I said earlier, and was ultimately the reason that we were so confident having Holy Cross still in the field.
Huh. I guess, yeah.
All right.
Playoff games abound last week.
Yeah, no kidding. They had a playoff game, it seemed, week 12 and the CCG, and now they're in the field. So,
should we give the people what they want?
Yeah, I hear there's some people nitpicking about something around here.
Boo.
So, without further ado, we will release the NIT bracket.
there it is.
Look at that.
This is the first time I've seen. That's the actual bracket, dude.
Oh.
I was like, that's too many teams.
My bad.
Man, number 22 looks awesome down there.
Hold on.
That's brilliant.
You can just impeach Tenny.
That's why we have a new
September
chairman.
Fools. There we go.
All right, here's
There
the
it is.
actual NIT. All right. So this is the first time I've seen all of these rankings put together. What jumps out to you guys? We have the top 4 seeds as the first 4 out, but then quite a solid group after that.
I mean, Sam Houston State came in. They really had an awful stretch at the end. I think they went 0-5 in their last 5 games and sunk below. So I'm impressed to see that they were able to keep their head above water and make it in at number 14. I think a Florida A&M game is going to be really rough for them, and I would take slow in that one. But impressive for them to make it in. And then again, you have number 7, Jacksonville State. Aren't they 6-6?
They are 6-6, but that was one of the contentious things last week. Is,
incredible.
They have just this amazing resume, arguably one of the greatest feats ever. They have a 6-6 record, but they defeated the committee's top 2 teams, Bethune-Cookman and Incarnate Word. The only loss dealt to Palo this season, and one of the only 3 losses dealt to Incarnate Word, the second best resume. It's so crazy to look at that resume.
Absolutely insane. Absolutely. And number 16, Elon. I don't know if Tenny, you know off the top of your head, but do you know who number 17 is and who just missed it? I guess
the team that just missed would have been Chattanooga. Was the team that just got bumped out. And they got bumped out by because one of the rules for the NIT is if you make a conference championship game and lose, you are guaranteed a spot in the NIT. So Elon and Bucknell were ranked below Chattanooga in composite, but since they made their conference championship games, they get slotted into the NIT.
Yep, and there were a few others that had the high enough composite to make it even without that, like Morehead State, and I want to say there's another one, but I'm blanking.
Well, Samford, I believe, was the other one.
No,
not Samford, but it was another ASUN team that was above.
Oh, you're talking about the ones that got knocked out. Yeah. Stetson got knocked out, and yeah.
Stetson and Chattanooga were the ones knocked out by Bucknell and Elon.
That's right.
So again, if you are hosting a tournament, this is your 48-hour warning at 6:35 p.m. now, actually, Pacific time, to get your teams in and get going. I'll add each and every one of you to the bot so that way you can create your own threads, and I'll get that all going up tonight, as well as getting this podcast out, this selection show out tonight, hopefully, so that it can be viewed tomorrow. Although I don't know if we have any more content that we'd like to discuss, or if
we want to break down the bracket anymore, we just kind of briefly touched on some of those upset matchups. What do you guys what are you guys seeing for maybe some Final Four picks or something like that?
Well, first of all, the most intriguing to me is that upper left quadrant.
Yeah, when that was shaping up,
ASUN teams.
It's so unintentional, and it almost brings up the conversation that we had in the first months of creating FCS. Do we do what the real life FCS does and shift around based on conference alignment? And that probably would have helped the ASUN there.
They do it so that you don't have any games, or you hopefully don't have any games of people on your own resume. Yeah. So technically, So it's a good question, because I remember that first season we had the Big Sky with 7 teams on one side of the bracket, and Cal Poly on the other, and I mean that gets really rough, especially if you're trying to look at if you're trying to get your conference to be more well known, and you get a couple teams in, but if they play each other first week, that's really tough, and you've pretty much been limited to one team in the second round, and luck to get you some to get your conference more well known. And personally, I think I'm fine with either. I'd be down with either, keeping it as it is or doing that, but that's it's not on the table currently. But
right, I currently like the current format simply because, due to comp and due to the way that we rank teams, there are going to be, based on out-of-conference records, just better conferences in general. And it's hard to realign so many different teams, especially if you're realigning the buys. And so I think what the format we have right now is all right. Also, Campbell just pinged us asking how many new teams. We've got 13 teams making their debut in the playoffs. I don't have the numbers for the coaches making their debuts. For instance, Furman and Penn are making their debuts, but Jocks and Uga have both already been in the playoffs. 13 teams are making their debut, and I've got on here 7 teams that are 3 for 3 making the playoffs. That's Bethune-Cookman, Incarnate Word, Mississippi Valley State, Princeton, Cal Poly, Montana, and Northern Iowa.
Some blue bloods in there. Fake FCS
Definitely.
blue bloods.
And I thought it was interesting that the
top
5 seeds are
top 5 seeds
are 3 for 3. I thought that was extremely interesting. Stood out to me.
Cal Poly with its lowest seed ever at number 5.
That is so true. Yeah. Yeah, and MVSU, I want to say, has had a bye all 3 seasons now. The only team to do so.
Man, it's
Cal
interesting.
Poly as well.
Oh, duh. Well, yeah, sorry. Good call.
I want to just take Bethune-Cookman and just be like, Bethune-Cookman's going to run the table. But we know that in his first game against Montana last season in the playoffs, Palo lost, and I don't think that that's a legitimate obviously he's not going to play Habes again, but it does bring up some kernel of doubt as to whether or not the playoffs could be some sort of kryptonite to his play. And if that game hadn't happened, I think I would take Bethune-Cookman all the way, and I still think I will take them to win that quadrant. But I'm still I would have to see how they play in order to determine whether I think they're gonna, take it all the way. Otherwise, they'd be my favorite, which is chalk. But
I would argue that obviously this has to do with what we've already pandered to all night, is the greatest regular season ever. But in the past 2 years, the number 1 seeds, they were the favorites to win the tournament, but not by that much. There were number 2 seeds staring them in the face that were arguably the exact same, and we saw the number 2 seed win the title in both seasons. And so we didn't have that heavy favorite like we do Bethune-Cookman this year. I think there's a pretty decent gap between Bethune-Cookman and the field, and it's kind of interesting. I think I would take Bethune-Cookman to win it all right now.
I would have to agree that there's a gap.
I just think that my rationale is last season, Bethune-Cookman, if you want to talk about their any things being off in the playoffs, they began to lose in the regular season already. They were 9-0 or 8-0, I believe, and they finished 1-3 in their last 4 games. So they already began the slide into the playoffs, and we don't see anything close to that right now.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. So, yeah, I do think that you're right with that. Like, I love Moofish, but Incarnate Word sticking up into number 2, I feel like could have been, if you weren't paying attention to those last few weeks, could be a very big surprise to you, because you had teams like Princeton and Cal Poly who are just trucking, and MVSU who was undefeated for so long. But for Incarnate Word to kind of sneak up and snag that number 2 spot, it also makes me feel like, I know the committee's doing their work, and if Bethune-Cookman's won, and I'm not so confident in Incarnate Word, then Bethune-Cookman should definitely be my favorite, like my overwhelming favorite. But regardless, they're not going to play for a couple weeks, or probably more like a week, given the speed of these teams. But
right.
But what do we think about these first round matchups? Any single one of them. I think Campbell versus Furman is the most intriguing.
That's my favorite. Yep.
That's definitely the most intriguing.
I mean, you've got 2 of the biggest personalities in FCS, no doubt. You've got the Congressional Campbell, one of the best article writers in the FCS as well, and, just no big deal. Number 20 seed is your reigning national champion.
Which we can blame
a team
Tenny
that I
for.
do not believe trailed in the playoffs last season, which is just bananas. I think I trailed in every game I played.
Campbell has a big uphill battle coming for him. I don't think that Campbell, or I should say, I don't think Furman is going to be the biggest favorite out of every single game, but I do think that you would be a little crazy not to take the national champion who didn't, like you said, trail at all in the playoffs. If you didn't take them to at least have, an equally good shot as Princeton or Cal Poly to win that whole quadrant. And I know Uga and I have had our disagreements in the past, but I think I have to respect his play as a FCS opponent, and I'll be rooting for Campbell because he's my good friend, and I think he's got I'd love to see him barrel through Furman into the Princeton game, but I would still take Furman. Probably by 2 scores.
Ooh.
You're hurting him. He's
I
in
know.
the channel right
I
now.
said good friend, and then I said he's going to lose by 2 scores. But good friends don't make fake footballers all the time. And I would say, right, Tenny, but you did beat me. Campbell's in the playoffs. I'm not. So what do you know?
That is something I was going to.
Neither of us are in the playoffs.
In our first committee rankings of the season, this might depress Danny a little bit. We had Bethune-Cookman 1, followed by Mississippi Valley State, Sam Houston State, Stetson, Youngstown State, Montana State, Bryant, Incarnate Word, Cal Poly, and Kennesaw State. So a hit rate of 70%, pretty solid. And the other 3 were either in the NIT or just bumped out of it, so still in the top 50 in comp. So we got a question here in the chat. The hardest path and the easiest path that we see. We can do it by team, or we can do it by just quadrant in general to emerge from the quadrant. But what do you guys see jumping out to you?
I will say the hardest quadrant is that upper left one. You've got BC, Kennesaw, Bama A&M, Hampton, Mercer, and Wofford. Like that. That to me is just a bloodbath of a conference. You've got four ASUN teams. You've got Hampton, who's been a known power, comes in at a low seed, but he came on strong at the end of the season. I think whoever comes out of that quadrant will be one of the favorites to win it all.
Yeah, that makes sense, honestly. I think one quadrant we haven't really talked about tonight is top right quadrant. I think obviously you got the number 2 seed, and they might not even be the biggest talking point of that. You've got Youngstown State making their first playoff appearance, Penn making their first playoff appearance, Montana, who's extremely hot coming into the playoffs, making their third consecutive, and Merrimack, who sits at the 15 seed. They're the 8th best offense in the all of FCS last season. So you've got Merrimack, if they were to beat Montana, you've got the number 1 offense versus the number 8 offense. We could see some pretty high scoring in that second round matchup. And I'd love to see what would happen if we theoretically got a Penn Youngstown State second round matchup.
Well, I guess my last little question for you guys would be, what would be the most intriguing championship game that you could compose? You take two teams on opposite sides. Who do you think would make the best, most intriguing game?
I think I'm going to say if you could have a Princeton-Penn championship game. I know they've met a couple times in the Ivy League championship, but that means nothing compared to the national championship.
Tenny, that is so funny. I just filled out my challenge, and I had Princeton MVSU in the final, but I had MVSU defeating Penn in the rematch of that insane game that we had season 2. I think MVSU Penn in a semifinal is one of would be a fantastic.
That's a good one.
That would be a fantastic game. But as far as championship game, yeah, it's going to be hard to beat a theoretical Princeton Penn.
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously 1-2 would be exciting. It'd be the second consecutive year if you saw Bethune-Cookman incarnate word. Really, really excited if we do get Bethune-Cookman in the quarterfinal, and if Alabama A&M does beat Hampton, we could see that all ASUN quarterfinal game right there. And we saw Bethune-Cookman played pretty close against Ampersand in the title game, and Kennesaw State could get a second shot at Bethune-Cookman as well. That'd be intriguing.
I'd love to see Delaware and Bama A&M. No real ulterior motive between the number 6 and the number 9 team playing each other, but I think that would be a pretty interesting matchup.
Unfortunately, it would be a 96 in our in the reading left to right.
We can flip. We can look at a mirror.
We should reseed. All right. Yeah, there's some definitely intriguing storylines. I'm trying to look at another potential. I think completely implicit non-bias here, but number 20 versus number 22 would be exciting too.
I don't know. Number 22 would have to. I mean, he just isn't talking here enough, so it'd be kind of a boring.
That's true. Yeah, that's fair. It'd be like the first season where they just finished overnight and nobody knew the title ended.
Oh my goodness! I'm glad I don't. Do we have any Reddit onlys in here? I don't know.
That's an excellent question, because the last 2 playoffs we certainly have.
I don't think so.
I know Long Island is retiring, but they're definitely still in the Discord.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen New Hampshire speak. It's not as frequent, but
you just said
they do definitely.
He's definitely spoken. Yeah.
Jake wants to know any RNG users in the playoffs. We will see. Last time we didn't know until like
all 24.
Yeah, all 24. How do you think we got here, dude? Come on. I don't think so, unless I don't know about Texas Southern or Holy Cross talking a lot, but I am not in the Discord as much as I used to be, so. So please roast me in Selection Show chat if I got that wrong.
Should be a good tournament.
All right, do we have any more questions from the field, from the Selection Show chat? If you do, please ping me because I did not get any when I asked for a ping last time. But if you don't have any, I think we could close it out.
Favorite color is orange. Easy.
Favorite color, orange?
Orange.
I mean, if you look at that playoff field, definitely. Fastest, slowest game. For the first round, let me look.
Slowest game,
Thoughts on
Mercer
Berlin?
Wofford.
Hertha Berlin is my favorite Bundesliga team, so that's my thoughts on Berlin. But what did you say?
Said
The
slowest.
fastest or slowest?
Slowest will probably be Mercer Wofford. I know my boy Mercer.
I think New Hampshire, Northern Iowa might be slowest.
You think?
I've been pretty slow lately. Yeah.
I can
Wow,
see it.
he's rigging it already.
Yeah. I'm trying to get it to the 10th day. Fastest though, I think it depends on the activity of Long Island, obviously. But
I was just
Penn
gonna say.
Penn has had speedies
I was gonna
many times.
Penn, yeah, Jocks can be real quick.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens.
Campbell and Furman could be, although it probably won't get much action tonight.
If
right.
No
So
other
they probably won't
games
finish
tonight,
first. But as far as like start and end time, I think you're probably right on that one.
Yeah.
First bye round team to lose. Well, when I lost my first year, I was big sad. So who's going to be the most big sad?
I don't want to pick anyone.
Oh, I definitely do. I would say Delaware, probably.
Wow. React Delaware in chat. And
no bias.
Chase.
No, I think New Hampshire will take them down.
Yeah, but it's the first. That game will be the last to end.
You're so right. Other than that, I think with all our talk of Penn advancing to the semis and title game, I think Bernie's got a lot on his hands there in the 7-10. But I mean, any 7-10 matchup is going to be pretty even anyhow. 8-9 is going to be even as well.
You mean 24-8?
That's right. 24-8 is going to be extremely even. Do not write off my man Hampton.
It's all good.
Oh, God damn it. That is...
That's cold.
Shit.
It was cold. Come on.
Well, can't say I didn't do it.
You're tanking Chase.
But yeah.
Okay. All right.
Fade me. I would say, yeah. And then whoever we get out of Campbell and Furman, that'll be just a fantastic 4 versus 13 or 20 game. We've seen Princeton play so many classics in the second round. It was the classic against Bethune-Cookman in season 1, the classic of like triple OT against Villanova last year. So I want to see what we get this year.
Wasn't the Penn Princeton one an overtime game as well?
I
just feel like I remember an overtime game in the playoffs that season that I had to.
No, yeah, it was Bethune-Cookman Princeton.
Yeah.
It was before
Jocks
moved. Yeah, that was the first season. Yeah. Second round.
Yeah. Human fuck up ref Tenny.
Dude, that was nutty.
I messed up one of the key plays.
I'm glad the bot works now.
Well, I'm picking Princeton to win by a safety in his first game. A last-second safety.
It will be tied in overtime and a safety.
Not by 2, by a safety.
It'll be the end of. He'll be up or down by 1 point. Opponent on the 1 with 7 seconds or whatever seconds left. Cause a safety to win.
I like it.
Yeah.
My favorite prime number is 19. Thanks for asking, Palo.
17, baby.
The list of teams that didn't make the playoffs are NIT. That's everyone else.
Is there a list?
If you weren't mentioned, you're not in.
For the last 2 years, Campbell was on that list, but not this year, buddy. Proud of you. All right, any more questions, or are we ready to wrap this thing up? This is a lot of fun. It was a little nerve-wracking at the beginning. I didn't know how people would react. I'm glad that we had a really good turnout. Coys indeed, dude. Gareth effing Bale, get in. All right. Well, if Danny's talking, I can't hear him.
I'm not.
I don't know if he's... Okay, I just saw green around your face there. All right, guys. Well, make sure to join the FBS server in like 12 days when they drop their rankings. And without much more being said, Thanks for joining us. It's a really good turnout. Excited for like 30 minutes from now when we drop the threads and I'm down like 7-0.
Yeah, we'll probably start. I'll probably start starting the games. I don't know, in a half hour or so.
Sounds good.
Just
Make sure you
give
go
people
fill out
time.
those brackets, like Tenny said. There's one for the NIT as well as the playoffs, so do both.
Yeah.
All right, Danny. Whenever you are ready to get this recording out of here, I'm done.
All right. Thank you so much for showing up, guys. Hope to see you here next season. Bye.